Okay, so hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the live. If it just like does glitching things, I do apologize in advance because there is a bit of a lag internet wise, so we might have just a little bit of a problem in that regard, but otherwise we're gonna be shooting the breeze today, and we're just gonna talk about like strategy, I guess, or brainstorming, whatever, and trying to see like where we're at, where we could possibly head. Like, hopefully, you know, um, we're not the only people thinking in this regard, but otherwise, yeah. Like, so what I did for today, I just kind of like we're gonna work through a couple of chapters of just various ideas. If you have anything to contribute, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat, drop it in the comments section. It is entirely up to you, and then we can see. I'm gonna look like a I'm gonna have a vibe. Okay, so anyway, I have sort of like planned a couple of chapters, couple of topics to go through. So it's essentially like what I would write, like as a book, right? It's just like, but otherwise it's gonna be pretty all over the place. So please bear with me, and so you can always just like drop some thoughts in the comments and see which direction we are taking. Honestly, like some of this is gonna be a surprise to me too because it was a pretty yeah, it was a pretty random thing that I just kind of like thought of today. I was like, okay, cool. Let's see if AI can, um, let's see if AI can be of any assistance because clearly, like, it's taking over a lot of things these days. Why not take over, the trading of government? So let's see what's gonna happen. I hope that you can actually like hear me just fine. I don't have my microphone on because I think it needs to be charged. So we're not going to be doing that. But anyway, I am rambling and I am the only person here. It's kind of actually pretty cool to just like think out loud but still run the risk of someone else listening in on my conversation. But anyway, so I like dropped a couple of things in my AI assistanting, and then we're gonna see like yeah where it takes us, and hopefully the internet holds up because I think we're probably gonna finish this at around in about like 2-ish hours. So I did start a little later today, but that's gonna be fine because I think it's gonna be fine. Doesn't really matter. I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do like a very long. So, so I didn't want to do like I didn't want to finish too late. It's literally like 6:30 p.m. right now where I am. I've had a pretty interesting day, so I kind of like I would love to just like go to bed, but I also want to do this. I also want to like run through these ideas so they're not just in my brain. And yeah, so let's see what we can come up with. Okay, so I have, yeah, let's see what we can download and what kind of like ideas we can play around with. Let us have a look. See, okay, so chapter one. So I'm going to read each like idea breakdown like a book chapter sort of thing, because I think like it will be a lot easier to sort of like put the ideas that way, and then we'll see the book comes together. If it doesn't, then who cares? Alrighty, so chapter one is, so after each chapter, right? After each chapter, I think it would be you. Like, if you're joining in at any point, please feel free to drop your thoughts. And then I think I'm just going to do like a brain dump after each chapter and just like say what my thoughts are, or maybe just going through each chapter and see like I'll just probably throw out whether I'm vibing with an idea or not, whatever. So let's just see. Okay, so chapter one. Okay, so chapter one. Chapter one, the mental framework of a leader. So thinking from vision, not emotion. A leader's mind is wired differently from the average person's mind, right? It is built around responsibility rather than reaction. Where most people wait for like the perfect moment, the ideal conditions, or even the permission of others, a leader usually just acts. Scripture frames this distinction with a principle of stewardship. So, oh my gosh, what did I do? Okay, I just want to make sure that the sound is still sounding. I'm gonna start over because yeah, because that just okay. So I just wanted to make sure that the sound actually makes sense, because I feel like I'm mumbling. Okay, chapter one: the mental framework of a leader. So thinking from vision, not emotion. So a leader's mind is wired differently from the average person's mind. It's built around responsibility rather than reaction. Where most people wait for a perfect moment or the ideal conditions or even the permission of others, a leader usually just acts. Scripture frames this distinction with a principle of stewardship. So, to whom much is given, much is required. This isn't merely a moral statement, it is a blueprint for leadership. The leader recognizes that authority is a responsibility entrusted, not a privilege earned by luck or circumstance. Waiting for systems to improve or for others to act is the mindset of a passive participant. But leaders refuse that mindset. They see problems, they assess what is within their power, and they move decisively. Victim thinking blames history and culture and economic conditions or even politics, but leadership thinking asks a different question. What can I control today? So that shift in perspective is the first and most critical step toward leadership. It's a sort of a mental realignment from reactive dependence to proactive agency. That is, I feel like in a nutshell, a very, you know, normal way of thinking about a leader, like a normal, that is, like when you think leader, I feel like that describes the whole premise of leadership pretty clearly. Okay, so consider Nehemiah, the cupbearer who became the restorer of Jerusalem's walls. He did not wait for political favor, nor did he demand ideal conditions before acting. When he saw the walls in ruins, he grieved, he prayed, and prepared. He formulated a plan, he mobilized resources and began rebuilding despite the opposition, despite scarcity and uncertainty surrounding him. What distinguished Nehemiah was not raw talent or political clout, it was the clarity of vision and the discipline to act within his sphere of influence. Right? He understood that waiting for perfect circumstances was a trap. Leadership begins when vision is prioritized over comfort. I feel like a lot of us always hear that like getting too comfortable in a situation or getting too comfortable in life does not really give you the results that you want. So yeah, so I know a lot of people say comfort is the enemy, but I don't want to I feel like there's a more effective way of saying it, but otherwise, that is essentially like the premise. Leaders act in conditions of scarcity, uncertainty, and resistance, using the limits they face as instruments of ingenuity rather than as excuses for inaction. This principle is timeless. Every leader, whether in biblical narratives or in modern politics, has followed the same pattern. You see what is broken, you envision what could be, and take deliberate action toward that vision. That's it. So, emotion is often mistaken for direction, but in the framework of leadership, it's merely data, right? A surge of anger, fear, or discouragement is not a reason to act. It is information to interpret wisely. Leaders do not suppress their emotions, they understand it, they calibrate it, and they use it to inform their decisions without letting it dictate their actions. That is, I feel like that is an efficient leader. The ability to regulate one's inner world, your thoughts, your habits, your moods, and your impulses is as critical as any external skill. So any skill that you could maybe go to college for, any skill that you could maybe learn from experience at work, or any skill that you could learn from wherever, raising a family or going to school, working, or building something, building whatever it is that you're building, whether it's a physical thing, or a business, whatever it is, but like handling your inner conflicts or impulses is usually a very useful skill to have so that you can be more effective as a leader, either in your workplace or wherever you find yourself that day. Who is the time? All right, we still have plenty of time. I don't know why I'm even checking the time. So let's continue. If your emotional state determines your daily decisions, your leadership will be inconsistent and reactive, which is true because like moods and like how you feel, if you let those things dictate what you do that day, you're not going to be very effective. Conversely, when you rule your inner world, your choices become deliberate, they become measured and aligned with vision. Leadership therefore starts internally. Before authority manifests externally, it's first established in the mind and in the heart of the leader. The person who can master the internal environment is the one who can influence the external environment with clarity, consistency, and credibility. You've already done the work inside, you've trained yourself, and then by the time you now have to train others, you have the experience essentially. I feel like that is essentially what it is. So, thinking like a leader also means recognizing the difference between waiting for opportunities and creating them. Most people wait for permission. They wait for a break, for the right moment. Leaders do not. They act where they are, with the resources they have, and in the circumstances they face. Waiting is the language of fear, but action is the language of faith. We say it all the time. Faith without works is dead or never. Faith here does not mean naive optimism. It means disciplined trust in one's preparation, principles, and purpose. Leaders take responsibility for their environment rather than seeking to escape it. They build capacity quietly, strategically, and relentlessly. Each small victory, each decision to act instead of wait compounds over time. By the time they reach visible leadership positions, they have already built credibility, competence, and a track record of faithful action. Leadership is not an event, it is a series of decisions executed with integrity and vision. So basically, like when you've already done the work within yourself, it's easier to lead others because you've done it, you've sort of like worked out the kinks even, and you understand like certain bottlenecks, you understand certain blockages, you understand how to overcome certain things, you are able to anticipate like any weaknesses or any opportunities a lot quicker, or even any threats or whatever, and you are able to even gauge how much of going for something is actually going to work out, rather than like that if you stop try to pursue one thing, you're like maybe that's not going to work out, but and then you try something else, you're like, yeah, this one has been working, it's been tried, it's been tested, and you know that because you first did it with yourself, right? So it's like building habits. When when you're able to do that for yourself, then you're able to train someone else to do it. But otherwise, if you can't do it for yourself, then it doesn't become very effective, like when you try to do it with someone else. But let's continue. Finally, leadership begins when you stop outsourcing your life to luck, circumstance, or the expectations of others. The world will never guarantee your success. Circumstances will rarely be perfect, and people will not always support you. So, waiting for these conditions is a subtle form of surrender. You're basically giving up on yourself. True leadership begins with a commitment to act within your sphere of influence, however small it may be. I know that a lot of people tend to get discouraged or tend to feel discouraged because they feel like, how much power do I even have, or how much can I actually even effect any change? But you can, like regardless of where you are, you can still influence someone else. You can still make a difference in some way that's going to either propel you towards a bigger thing to accomplish, or it's going to help someone else, move in that direction. And just by your influence, you were still able to reach a desired result. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to achieve everything, but you can cause that ripple effect, and you can literally like be the match that lights the fire or whatever. So so every choice that you make, every habit that you cultivate, every opportunity that you seize, no matter how minor, is the rehearsal for the responsibilities that lie ahead. So thinking like a leader is not a skill reserved just for the privileged or for the powerful, but it's a mindset that anyone can begin to practice today. Yeah, so literally like just leading yourself to the next milestone actually proves that you can do it. So by committing to responsibility over reaction and action over passivity, you lay the foundation for authority and influence and lasting impact. Leadership is not given to those who wait, it is claimed by those who prepare, act, and persevere. So that is chapter 1, the mental framework of a leader. So thinking from vision to emotion. Now we're going to move on to I wanted to look like a pantsula today, and I think I have achieved my goal. let's let's move on to chapter 2. Chapter 2. Hmm. Okay. Next up is chapter 2, right? Right, so chapter 2 is the difference between reaction and responsibility. All right, let's see what it says. So, leadership begins with a conscious decision to respond rather than merely react. A victim mentality thrives on circumstances and injustice and perceived wrongs. It waits, it complains, and it demands attention without taking ownership of action. A leader's mentality, in contrast, thrives on purpose, vision, and principle. The difference is subtle but profound. A victim sees the world as something that happens to them, while a leader sees the world as something that they can influence through deliberate choices. Yes, that is absolutely 100%. So, reaction is immediate, often emotional, and self focused. I'm sure you already had something in your brain that you were thinking about when I read that statement. But responsibility is intentional, principled, and outward focused. Leadership Leaders recognize that life will never present perfect conditions or absolute fairness. Waiting for permission or ideal timing is not leadership, it's avoidance. To step into true authority, you must shift from reaction to responsibility. Consider the life of Moses as a vivid illustration. Early in his life, he reacted to injustice with emotion. killing an Egyptian who was oppressing an Israelite, right? That action, even though it was rooted in a desire for justice, was impulsive and uncontrolled. It forced him into exile, delaying his calling. Later, Moses returned to leadership with a radically different approach. He responded to God's assignment rather than to his anger or sense of personal grievance. His leadership was no longer defined by reaction, but by responsibility aligned with divine purpose. So it's tricky when you don't know like what purpose you're doing things for, or you're doing it because of someone else or whatever it is. And yeah, so you have to have some kind of grounding for yourself in order to understand the responsibility for yourself, not necessarily like have someone else tell you, because if where's the leadership there if you're constantly like having to wait for someone else to give you a task list, then that's not really leadership. You just like an employee, or you just like, I don't know, yeah, you're a follower. So leaders usually take the responsibility upon themselves and they actually assign tasks to other people and that kind of thing. So because they are driven by a specific purpose, because they understand what it is that they are, standing for, what it is that they are working towards, that kind of thing. So those things, they give you a sense of purpose, and then you like wake up each day and you're like, yeah, I gotta do this thing because I have to achieve A, B, and C. But if you do not have that thing that says I have to achieve A, B, and C, and then you kind of like, what is the point? So usually like that is where you lean more towards reaction, because like you're waiting for someone else, you're waiting for something else to happen, and then now you're like, oh, okay, now it's time to act. But yeah, anyway, he did not seek immediate relief or retribution. He accepted accountability for guiding an entire nation. That shift is the defining line between reaction and leadership. So emotion alone produces temporary, often destructive outcomes, while responsibility produces enduring influence. Very important to note that. Like when you have a sense of responsibility for something, you don't just act haphazardly over anything. You are quite strategic, quite deliberate in your movement, and yeah, because you understand that you are responsible for something, you're responsible for an image, a brand, or whatever it is that you're responsible for. So you know that you're basically like always just representing whatever that thing is, whatever the responsibility is. And you're always thinking long term, like how is this going to affect the responsibility in the long term? So you always want to lean less on emotions, because emotions can be pretty destructive when you don't, especially when you don't know how to like handle them. So you want to, yeah, it's very important to like train your emotions and to get to a point where you're no longer like just reactive because someone ticked you off or whatever, something happened and you're like, but when you have a sense of responsibility, it's different, because then that way, like even if someone does something, like you're already thinking 10 steps ahead, because you've already had someone else even say something about whatever the situation is, and you're like, yeah, is it worth it? Maybe not. And yeah, you are more deliberate, you are more strategic when you move differently when you are standing on business, standing on responsibility, and you are driven by purpose rather than more on of a reactive state of mind. So the essence of responsibility is accountability, both to God and to those you lead. Leaders stop needing sympathy and begin accepting consequences. They stop asking, why me? Or who is to blame? And they start asking, what do I do now? So the shift from they to we is the language of leadership. When a failure occurs, a victim sees proof of oppression, but a leader sees feedback. Criticism becomes a mirror, mistakes become lessons, and obstacles become opportunities to grow character and competence. So, this mindset requires maturity and discipline and a willingness to look inward before blaming anything outward, right? It demands a moral framework strong enough to sustain vision even in adversity. Leadership is cultivated not in comfort but in accountability, and it is measured by the capacity to assume responsibility when no one else has any desire to do so. Okay. So, the shift from reaction to responsibility also transforms how a leader perceives power and influence. The victim asks for relief and seeks immediate deliverance from hardship, often relying on external sources for change. The leader asks for assignment and seeks to be prepared for authority before it arrives. Leadership is not about demanding power or status, it's about preparing to steward it well. This preparation occurs in the unseen and even in the most difficult spaces. So that's where you're learning skills, that's where you're building your character, that's where you're navigating conflict, and that's where you are making disciplined choices where no one else is watching you. So by embracing responsibility, a future leader builds credibility and resilience and vision. Authority without accountability is hollow, but accountability without authority shapes a leader who is ready when opportunity arrives. So it's kind of like when, I don't know, like when you're running a race, maybe. So if you've been on like training, if like every day you're going out for a 5K run, or you're going strength training, or you're doing some type of class, when your race date comes, you're prepared, right? And let's say maybe you're like, it's just a random race that you maybe even, it just springs up on you and like, yeah, okay, maybe. So if you are prepared for it, then it's easier to just be like, yeah, I'm in. But if you're not prepared for it, you're like, ooh, and then you're missing out on like a pretty cool experience. You could be missing out on networking, you could be missing out on like, I don't know, like a different social circle. You could be missing out on something that is supposed to propel you towards something else in future. So, or you could be delaying certain things. So yeah, it's always just, it's better to be prepared than to be preparing. It's better to be a prepared man than a prepared man, something like that. So that is essentially what that frame of thinking is. Finally, moving on from reaction to responsibilities, the spirit is a spiritual as well as practical transformation. God does not anoint those who complain and cling to injustice. He anoints those who build, persist, and steward what they are entrusted with. The mindset of leadership is not merely about survival or deliverance, right? It's about development. It asks you to step into the role you will eventually occupy, to cultivate the character, the discernment, and resilience required for influence, because influencing or leading is a lot of work and it's a lot of pressure. So if you can handle, the things that you sort of, if you can handle the roadblocks, if you can handle the pressure that you come across each day, if you can handle, yeah, if you can handle like the daily things, then that is essentially you being trained to become the leader that you're supposed to be. So that is you gaining experience points to becoming that leader that you are supposed to be. And that is basically what that means. So you no longer focus on what is owed to you, but on what you are called to give. You start waiting for others to create conditions for your leadership and you start creating those conditions for yourself. So, this transition from reaction to responsibility is the crucible in which leaders are forged. It is where ambition meets humility, where vision meets discipline, and where faith meets action. It is the beginning of a path that leads to not only power but to impact and legacy and enduring purpose. 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 And that is chapter 2, the difference between a reaction and a responsibility. Then we're gonna move on to chapter 3 swiftly. Chapter 3. Chapter 3, chapter 3, chapter 3. Okay. We've done chapter 1 and 2, right? Okay, so chapter 3. So, chapter 3, we're going to jump into some examples of a leader's mindset and see what those look like. Leadership is first cultivated in the mind long before it is recognized by others. The mental framework of a leader is what distinguishes those who rise to influence from those who remain passive observers. The Bible offers countless examples of men and women who were elevated not by circumstance, not by privilege, nor by immediate recognition, but by the discipline of thought, perspective, and purpose. So, Joseph, for instance, was sold into slavery, he was falsely accused, and he was even imprisoned. Yet, even in the pit and in Pharaoh's prison, he ruled mentally before he ruled administratively. He thought like a manager, like a steward of resources, and like a problem solver. So his perspective was strategic. He focused on what he could control, he focused even on what he could learn and how he could prepare for future responsibility. So leadership in Joseph's story was not a product of position, it was a product of mindset. While others allowed their suffering to shrink their vision or embitter their hearts, Joseph maintained clarity of purpose and integrity, demonstrating that mental leadership precedes formal authority. I mean, yeah, what else? We also have David. So, David provides another powerful illustration of mindset preceding position. He was a shepherd boy. Hi, a shepherd boy. He was a shepherd boy, tending sheep, seemingly far from the throne of Israel. Yet he ruled like a king long before he wore the crown. His faith, discipline, and ability to make strategic decisions, even when hunted by Saul, revealed a mental framework grounded in responsibility rather than reaction. David's victories over Goliath, his measured responses to provocation, and his patience while waiting for the right time to ascend to leadership demonstrate that vision cannot be restricted by circumstance. He cultivated discernment, courage, and trust in God before he assumed political or military authority. Goodness. Okay, so the key principle is that leadership is exercised in preparation, not just in opportunity. Right? It's formed in the hidden in the it is formed in the hidden seasons where others might see only ordinary toil, discouragement, or adversity. And that is when all of the prep work gets done, right? That's when you get shaken up a little bit and you're like, can you handle it? Because the things that are going to happen in the future are going to be bigger. So you need that training ground to, you know, to help you, handle what's coming. All right. Daniel's life reinforces this same principle. This time under the pressures of captivity and foreign rule. Taken from his homeland as a youth, as a youth, Daniel navigated the political and cultural complexities of Babylon with wisdom and integrity. He excelled in environments designed to erase his identity and diminish his influence. His leadership manifested in the excellence of his service, his ability to interpret visions, and his courage to uphold godly principles in the face of danger. So Daniel's authority was recognized not because he demanded it, but because he consistently demonstrated competence, character, and foresight. In all these examples, one consistent pattern emerges. Leaders do not allow circumstances to dictate the limits of their vision. They cultivate influence mentally, spiritually, and morally while waiting for opportunities to align with destiny. What is okay? I'm thinking of a song, but it's not coming to me. So modern examples mirror these timeless principles. We're going to go into an example that I'm not very fond of, but we're gonna. I feel like for the general populace, it is pretty. It's a pretty standard illustration of what a lot of people see as leadership. Yes. Okay, so modern examples mirror these timeless principles. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, yet he emerged not as a man embittered by circumstance, but as a statesman with extraordinary vision for reconciliation and nation building. Margaret Thatcher, in a male dominated political landscape, stood firm when Britain faced internal and external crisis, demonstrating that leadership requires mental resolve and commitment to principle, even when others waver. On a more local scale, ordinary South Africans, often operating without national recognition, demonstrate leadership by building grassroots movements, mentoring communities, and standing by integrity despite societal pressures. I I think we're all thinking about the same person, but we're gonna continue before we actually say it out loud. These modern examples highlight that the world does not hand leadership to those who wait passively. It elevates those who cultivate it in hidden seasons through preparation, persistence, and principled action. Yup. So the principle connecting all these stories is now clear. Leadership is a mindset long before it is a title. The shift is from victim to vessel, from protest to purpose. Those who wait for ideal conditions or recognition or permission remain spectators in their own lives. Those who adopt the leader's mindset seize the opportunities present within adversity, they cultivate skills when unseen, and they nurture vision when circumstances seem limited. So, mental leadership shapes character, it builds resilience, and it prepares individuals for influence when the timing and responsibility arrive. Right? To think like a leader is to focus on what you can do today, to act with integrity, and to prepare faithfully for the authority that will then follow. Whether in biblical times or in today times, leadership favors those who cultivate vision and purpose while remaining steadfast in trials, proving that true influence is the product of mindset, not mere circumstance. Because circumstances can look the opposite way, but because your mindset says, nah, it's gonna get done, then yeah, mindset will, it tends to win. It tends to win the race. Because I mean, we even see leaders, like people who are in positions of leadership, but they don't have the right mindset, and they tend to not be very successful. And so you want to make sure that it's your mindset that precedes the leadership part. But if you are in a leadership position, then obviously, like, you have to get your mind right, and you have to upskill yourself if you feel like your mindset is lacking or whatever. If you feel like you're somehow behind on thinking the right way, or you're, yeah, but you feel like something is not right, something, there's a disconnect somewhere, like you feel like you're not achieving what you're supposed to be achieving as a leader. You're not getting like a good response even from the people you're supposed to be leading, or whatever the case may be, then obviously there's a disconnect somewhere. So you have to figure out how to then, like, you have to first figure out what the issue is, right? And then figure out how to solve that problem. But yeah, so that just means that you also have to be surrounded by people who think the right way, people who are leaders. So that's good. That would be a very useful thing to do, to surround yourself with people who are leaders, and so that you can also stay in the right frame of mind and continue to be a leader. And because sometimes you are leading people who are actual leaders, and then you end up being led by the people who you're supposed to be leading. So then is that time to like retire your leadership or what? Like, I don't know. But yeah, so lots of things to think about. Let's move on to chapter 4, the source of authority. God gives and people recognize. Recognize. So, I mean, you can contest this all you like, but I feel like we have gotten to a point where we can all recognize what I'm about to say right now, because it's honestly, it's the truth. Come on, let's be so for real right now. Let's be so for real right now. Right now. Right. Who is that? I don't know who that is. Okay, let me continue. Wait, let's see. Especially when it's something that you. Okay. All right. So chapter. Ugh, who cares? Chapter 4, right? Yeah. Okay, we're on chapter 4. It's been almost an hour, and we've only gone through 4 chapters. Oh my gosh, I thought I was gonna go through like at least 16 chapters. Maybe I can still, hustle and go to like at least 10 chapters. Okay, I'm gonna speed run the chapter. I'm gonna speed run because, yeah, in an hour I want to hop off. So let's see if I can do 10 chapters in an hour. Not 10 chapters, it's gonna be what? 7 chapters in an hour. I think I can do 7 chapters in an hour. Oh, this is pretty. Okay, let's not get sidetracked. Chapter 4. Ooh, excusez-moi. Okay, I just wanted to check my notifications. There, we are good. Let us continue. All right, chapter 4. Chapter 4. I think if I quickly read through each chapter in about 5-ish minutes. Okay, let's say 6 minutes per chapter, and then I can get through 10 chapters. So I can get to 16 chapters. Okay, cool. Let's hustle. Chapter 4. The source of authority. God gives, people recognize. All legitimate authority begins with God. Scripture is explicit on this point. There is no authority except that which God has established. Authority in its truest form is never something that a person manufactures or seizes through force or manipulation. It is entrusted, given to those who are prepared, who have cultivated wisdom, character, and integrity. The first lesson in leadership is recognizing that power is not a prize to be won by ambition alone. It's a responsibility entrusted by God. When leaders attempt to take authority prematurely, they invite instability, opposition, and moral compromise. Saul, for example, grasped at leadership out of fear and impatience. He sought to assert control without waiting for God's timing. His reign became burdened with insecurity, disobedience, and ultimately loss of the throne. In contrast, David demonstrated patience and discernment. He endured years of preparation and persecution, waiting until God's timing was unmistakable. The throne came to him not because he chased it, but because he had cultivated the qualities necessary to steward it effectively. Authority in God's design is fundamentally different from worldly authority. Worldly power often rewards aggression, cunning, and the ability to outmaneuver rivals. God's authority, by contrast, rewards preparation, integrity, and faithful stewardship. It's not about dominance, but it's about service. When authority is rightly given, it carries grace, the supernatural enablement to lead with wisdom and courage and discernment. Conversely, authority taken illegally or unethically carries burden. It must constantly be defended, sustained through manipulation, fear, or coercion. Those who attempt to seize power prematurely often find themselves isolated, mistrusted, and ultimately undone. The lesson is simple, and yet it is pretty profound. God's timing matters, character matters, and preparation matters. Leaders who cultivate their inner life, demonstrate faithfulness in smaller responsibilities, and walk in integrity naturally. They attract influence. Authority does not require constant assertion when it is rightly given. Leadership begins with the recognition that influence flows from trust and not titles. Titles and positions can be granted by institutions or political maneuvering, but genuine authority is earned by character. When the time comes, the weight of your influence will be unmistakable. You will not have to fight for recognition because your life, your choices, and actions will compel respect and confidence. This is the kingdom principle. God promotes those who prove themselves trustworthy, not those who demand position through impatience or cunning. Every decision to act with integrity, every moment of faithful stewardship in smaller spheres, every choice to submit to God's principles rather than worldly shortcuts compounds over time. By the time formal authority arrives, it arrives naturally, it arrives effortlessly, and with enduring legitimacy. Waiting for God's timing does not mean passivity. On the contrary, it requires active preparation. Leaders cultivate discernment, humility, and excellence while remaining patient. David did not sit idle while Saul ruled. He built relationships, he honed his skills, and nurtured a vision for the nation. Joseph, imprisoned and forgotten, prepared the storehouses of Egypt by managing resources with excellence, laying the foundation for his later role as prime minister. Waiting is not inactivity, it is the discipline of preparation. It is proving in the small and unseen ways that you can be trusted with the weight of influence. God's authority is always given to those who have demonstrated that they can steward it wisely, faithfully, and justly. And finally, the principle extends beyond individual leaders to the way authority functions in society. Power that is taken without God's sanction leads to instability and corruption and fear. Authority that is given by God, in contrast, carries legitimacy, respect, and a framework for justice. The leader who waits and proves character does not need to manipulate or coerce or scheme, because influence comes because it has been earned through preparation and integrity and stewardship. If your goal is to lead, stop chasing titles or attempting to grab power. Begin proving your character. Begin cultivating wisdom. Begin walking faithfully in the responsibilities you already have. God's authority is unmistakable when it is rightfully granted, and the grace it carries sustains those who are entrusted with it far beyond what human effort alone could achieve. And true leadership begins not with ambition, but with faithful preparation, and the world always recognizes authority that is rightly given. So, we're going to move swiftly to chapter 5 because we need to get to chapter 16. Oh, Dios míos. Okay, chapter 5 it is. All right, so chapter 5. Okay, let's hustle. Chapter 5, the training ground of stewardship. Authority is never granted in a vacuum. God tests those who are called to lead long before they occupy positions of power. Leadership begins in preparation, not in prominence, and stewardship is the measure of readiness. Before Joseph could govern Egypt, he managed Potiphar's household faithfully. Before David could ascend the throne, he shepherded sheep with diligence, responsibility, and care. Daniel's influence in Babylon did not come from political connections or force, it came from his commitment to govern his conscience and conduct with excellence, even under observation by his captors. These examples illustrate that authority is earned gradually through consistent stewardship. Every responsibility, no matter how small or unseen, is a building block for the larger tasks to come. Leadership is a progression, a graduation from faithful service to visible influence, and the world often fails to recognize this subtle but critical truth. The training ground of stewardship is often obscure and unglamorous. While others chase recognition, the wise leader focuses on faithfulness in the small. Every assignment, every task, every moment of responsibility is an opportunity to cultivate character, judgment, and discernment. Success in these unseen areas signals readiness for the larger sphere of influence that God intends. Impatience is the enemy of stewardship. The desire to be seen often tempts aspiring leaders to shortcuts, such as bribery, manipulation, or compromise, or unethical strategies to secure their position. But every shortcut undermines the foundation of authority. Leadership acquired without preparation is pretty fragile. Power without tested stewardship collapses under pressure, and influence without character erodes trust. God's method is deliberate and often slow. Well, we'll so receive it, but it is sustainable. He builds capacity before visibility, ensuring that those who are entrusted with authority can carry it responsibly. The principle of stewardship extends beyond managing tasks to managing oneself. Joseph did not Joseph did not merely organize Potiphar's household, he mastered self-discipline, integrity, and relational wisdom. David did more than protect sheep. He developed courage, patience, and strategic thinking. Daniel's excellence was demonstrated not just in results, but in his unwavering obedience and moral clarity under scrutiny. In each of these cases, the external responsibilities were mirrors of internal readiness. God evaluates the heart, not the outcomes. Leaders who fail in unseen matters often fail in visible roles. Authority is a reflection of character, and character is cultivated over time through consistent choices and faithful action in every domain of life. Stewardship also involves learning to endure pressure without yielding to compromise. Every aspiring leader will face moments when shortcuts appear tempting, when ethical boundaries seem inconvenient, or impatience feels burdensome. These are precisely the tests that determine whether an individual is prepared to handle authority rightly. The temptation to grab power or cut corners or force outcomes reflects impatience and fear rather than faith and foresight. By contrast, leaders who grow through stewardship demonstrate resilience and integrity and discernment. They develop the capacity to navigate crises, manage complex systems, and inspire trust. The ability to maintain principle under pressure is the hallmark of someone who is ready for authority that will endure. In God's design, training is not optional, it is essential. Finally, the path to authority is less about speed and more about depth. Each test, each role, each responsibility is an investment in capacity. God's method ensures that those who lead are not only competent, but equipped to steward influence wisely and for the long term. Leadership is not seized through ambition or aggression, it is grown through faithful service, tested patience, and consistent integrity. Every unseen moment of discipline, every act of faithful stewardship, every decision to honor principle over expediency contributes to the leader that you are becoming. Authority is never grabbed, it is grown. By focusing on stewardship, you develop a foundation that cannot be shaken by circumstance or opposition or even temptation. You prepare to lead with wisdom, with courage, and with purpose, ensuring that when the time comes for visible influence, you are ready to serve, not merely rule. Because leadership is service, first of all. So now we move on to chapter 6, right? I think the reason why we're having so many issues in today's world is that we have this whole thing backwards. Not as it was designed, but like in a very different, very inefficient capacity or mindset or whatever it is. So now it's not actually working like it's supposed to be working. And it's creating random, ridiculous results that wasn't intended. Or, yeah, wasn't intended? Wasn't what was intended to to create. I don't know, but yeah, we are what is it? Shooting the breeze. So okay, so we've got about 50-ish minutes, and so I think we can do where are we? Chapter 6. So if we're in chapter 6 now, yeah, I can do 10. 10 chapters. 10, 11 chapters. How many chapters? Yeah, I think I can do it. Okay, let's hustle, let's hustle, let's hustle. Let's hustle. Okay, so let's remove this business, and then we put that. Okay. We are now on chapter 6. Okay, if I can be done with chapter 10 in the next 20 minutes, then we will be making good time. So that's us. Yeah, I think I can do it. I think it can be done. Okay, so now let's move on to chapter 6, right? Okay. Let me just find this business. Feels so good. So good. Okay. All right. Okay. There's a very good chapter that I want us to get to in the next 20-25 minutes. I want to wrap up very specific chapters for this session, and then we'll see, like, because yeah, we're getting to some good, we've done some good stuff, but we're gonna get into even better, even more good stuff. It's all good. It's all good. I know people don't think that's possible, but all things are possible. Okay, anyway, chapter 6. So that okay, so we're gonna speed run the next 4. Yeah, the next 4 chapters. And then we're going to get into sort of like the crux of what is today, right? So, okay. Chapter 6 is the dangers of illegitimate power and the reward of submission. Okay, so grabbing power outside of God's order is a path that always leads to instability, conflict, and eventual collapse. History, both biblical and modern, is filled with examples of leaders who pursued authority prematurely or through manipulation, only to watch their influence disintegrate. Absalom, 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 the son of King David, who is a vivid biblical illustration. He was intelligent, charismatic, and politically savvy, able to win hearts and sway crowds. Yet his rebellion failed because it was rooted in ambition rather than obedience. His charm and strategy could not compensate for the absence of God's sanction. The lesson is clear. Authority that is claimed through manipulation or coercion or disobedience carries inherent fragility. That's true. Those who seize power legitimately are forced to sustain it through fear, intimidation, and constant vigilance, which drains energy, it erodes trust, and invites opposition at every turn. Illegitimate power is inherently unstable because it relies on the compliance of others rather than the integrity of the leader. When authority is taken without God's blessing, loyalty must be enforced externally, often through threats, manipulation, or favoritism. By contrast, legitimate authority flows naturally from trust, credibility, and moral consistency. Leaders who are anointed by God do not need to coerce allegiance because their character, their vision, and preparation compel it. People often follow those who have proven themselves trustworthy, patient, and principled. The difference is subtle but is pretty profound. One form of authority is defended constantly by human effort, the other is sustained and strengthened by divine favor. Recognizing this distinction is essential for anyone aspiring to influence, particularly in the realm of public or political leadership. Submission is therefore not a sign of weakness or passivity, it's a strategic act that precedes sustainable authority. Jesus modeled this principle perfectly. Though all authority in heaven and on earth was ultimately given to him, it was preceded by complete submission to the Father's will. The cross was not the display of power, it was the demonstration of faithful obedience. Through submission, he fulfilled the conditions necessary for true authority to manifest. Aspiring leaders must learn the same principle. Influence follows through obedience, preparation, and faithful service, not through impatience, force, or ambition alone. The kingdom model teaches that one earns authority by serving without seeking immediate recognition, by enduring unseen trials faithfully, and by respecting the order through which influence is granted. The temptation to seize power illegally is often rooted in impatience and pride or the desire for visibility, or you want to be famous. Leaders who attempt shortcuts gain positions quickly but lack the foundation to sustain it. The pressure of illegitimate authority is constant. They must defend their position, they must manipulate relationships, and often compromise their values rather, to maintain their influence. Who wait for God's timing, who focus on character building, stewardship, and faithful service, develop authority that endures. Their influence is unshakable, not because it's uncontested, but because it is rooted in principle, integrity, and obedience. This distinction applies universally, whether in spiritual leadership, in politics, in business, or in community service. True authority does not demand, it invites, it earns, and sustains through trust. Ultimately, God grants lasting authority to those who learn to serve without being seen. Leadership begins with the willingness to carry the towel, the willingness to prioritize others' needs over self promotion, and to demonstrate faithfulness in small, often unnoticed responsibilities. Power that is fought for or taken is temporary and precarious. Power that is given by God is lasting and transformative, carrying grace that sustains the leader and blesses those under their care. The principle is consistent across scripture, across history, and across human experience. Submission precedes influence, obedience precedes authority, and faithful service precedes prominence. Aspiring leaders must embrace the discipline of waiting, the rigor of stewardship, and the strategy of submission, trusting that God's timing will bring undeniable authority when the preparation is complete. Those who master this principle need lead not only with influence but with enduring impact. Then, chapter 7. Chapter 7 is going to be a quick one. Yeah, chapter 7 is a quick one. Okay. Chapter 7, faithfulness before fame. So that is God's testing ground. Every great leader starts small. Scripture says, "He who is faithful in little will be faithful in much." That is like a diagnostic thing of leadership, I guess. God uses small assignments as an x ray for the soul, testing integrity long before public authority arrives. The hidden seasons of obedience are not punishment, they're preparation. David didn't start in the palace, he started in obscurity, defending sheep that no one cared about. But it was there, in the silence of the hills, that God saw a heart that he could trust with a kingdom. Joseph, Joseph did not begin in Pharaoh's courts. He began in a dungeon, managing the affairs of a prison that offered him nothing in return. It was not glamour that qualified him for greatness, it was stewardship. Most people want influence without investment, but that's not how God's kingdom operates. The process is rigorous and very deliberate. God does not promote talent, he promotes trustworthiness. Skills can be learned in months, but character takes years to prove. The small spaces, your home, your workplace, your community, they are training grounds of destiny. The way you handle small responsibilities reveals your readiness for greater ones. If you neglect the little, the large will destroy you. If you remain faithful when no one else is even watching, heaven takes note of it. So, leadership in God's economy is not about visibility but responsibility. The world chases exposure, followers, and applause, but God measures stewardship, discipline, and faith. When you can be trusted to lead quietly, to manage conflict with wisdom, to show up consistently, to serve with excellence, even when it's inconvenient, you are laying the foundation for future authority. God doesn't test your leadership by how you perform under applause, but by how you perform under pressure. So every unseen act of discipline, every private decision to do what is right is building credibility with heaven. So faithfulness before fame is the refining fire that separates temporary influences from lasting leaders. The waiting season is never wasted when it is spent growing in wisdom, humility, and endurance. Many want the title before the test, the spotlight before the service, but God's pattern remains unchanged. He hides leaders before he reveals them. He matures them in solitude, he sharpens them in obscurity, and trusts them with visibility only where their heart can carry it without corruption. So do not despise small beginnings. The smallest responsibilities are often divine auditions, if you will, for greater callings. So every day that you show up, every time you lead quietly, every moment you choose integrity over convenience, you are being trained for something far beyond what you can see. The small place is not the end of your journey, it's the foundation of your reign. Those who prove faithful in the ordinary are the ones that God can trust with the extraordinary. And I mean, we see that like all the time. We see people give up like so easily all the time because they just cannot handle They cannot handle maybe the work, they can't handle the pressure, and they give up. Like, do you really want to be known for as someone who just gives up when things get hard? Probably not. You sort of want to be known as that person who can handle things, right? And that's essentially what leadership is. I feel like there aren't a lot of people who are trying to even like understand what it is. It's just the titles seem like something that someone wants, and are willing to do whatever they want for that title. But a title, if you don't really even recognize like its substance, is it feels like something that is pretty useless, because it either destroys you, or you end up destroying the thing. So I mean, yeah, because there's no purpose, there's no substance there. And that's what causes people to give up. They like, if you didn't undergo any training, if you didn't, you know, fix smaller things before you ended up fixing bigger things, how are you gonna manage, like, when there's so much pressure every day, that comes? And because it's not just pressure from the work that you have to do, it's also pressure from the people that you have to be working with, the people who are working against you. It's a lot. And so you have to be prepared. You have to be ready to tackle some things, to avoid some things, to think strategically even when you don't feel like it, to yeah, you have to navigate certain systems. You have to, goodness me, you have to, yeah, it's a lot. So training is very important. Um, Otherwise, yeah, you just won't be able to handle some things. Speed run this business. We're in chapter 8. I cannot believe we're only still on chapter 8 right now. Like, we have 30 minutes left. How chapter 8? How am I gonna do 8 or 9 chapters in 30 minutes? That's not possible. Oy, oy, oy. Okay. Okay, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. We can do it. Yeah. Okay, chapter 8. Home, community, workplace. The real training ground. Okay, so leadership is not proven in speeches, it is proven in proximity. The true test of leadership is how you treat the people closest to you, not how you perform in public. If your relationship doesn't work in your home, it won't work in government. Authority starts with consistency, not campaigns. A leader who cannot lead their family with patience, integrity, and accountability will never sustain a nation under the same principles. The same patience it takes to listen to your spouse, the same discipline it takes to raise your children with values, and the same humility it takes to admit mistakes at home, those are the exact same traits that translate into national influence. Home is your first cabinet room. If your decisions bring peace there, they can bring order anywhere. Does that rhyme? The workplace is the second training ground, a daily test of integrity. Leadership is not about having power over others, it is about showing reliability under pressure. When you choose honesty over convenience, when you correct an error instead of hiding it, when you treat subordinates with dignity rather than dominance, you are proving that your authority is built on moral structure. Every small ethical decision that you make at work is a brick in the architecture of your future influence. Many people want a promotion before they master punctuality, loyalty, or diligence, but God promotes those who already act like stewards where they stand. Then there's community, the space where private discipline becomes public contribution. Leadership shows up when you organize what others ignore, when you mediate conflict that others avoid, when you build small systems that others overlook. You are not waiting for a title, you are practicing one. The communities where God measures your willingness to serve beyond your comfort zone. It's where your leadership becomes practical, not theoretical. The person who helps clean the street, or mentor a child, or start a local food drive is already shaping culture. So every act of initiative, no matter how minor, is training for larger responsibility. Think about it. If you can't steward 1,000 rand honestly, why should you expect to manage 1 billion rand in a national budget? The numbers change, but the principles don't. Leadership is never a leap, it is layers of stewardship that compound over time. Each role, each decision, and each sacrifice becomes a rehearsal for higher ground. If you cannot be trusted in a conversation, you cannot be trusted in a council. If you cannot manage a home budget, you cannot manage an economy. So God does not elevate people because of ambition, he elevates them because of accountability. So you have to stop waiting for the big platform. Lead where you are. Lead in your home by bringing order and love. Lead in your workplace by choosing excellence over excuses. Lead in your community by doing what others refuse to do. Leadership is simply consistent responsibility multiplied by time. When you lead well in small places, you are proving to heaven that you can be trusted in great ones. Nations are built by people who have mastered the art of leading quietly long before anyone else was watching. You better believe it. You better believe it. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to chapter 9. Chapter 9. Hmm. Okay, so chapter. Now, okay, if I can get to at least chapter 12, I think that would be a useful 11. Yeah, if we can get to chapter 11, chapter 12, chapter 12. Yeah, if we can finish off chapter 12, then I'll be fine with this. Chapter 12 or 13. I think chapter. Okay, let's just keep going and then see. We're gonna see where we go. But there's a specific chapter there that I really want us to get to. But yeah. Okay, cool. Anyway. No. Okay. Oh wait, I still have plenty of time. I still have like 25 minutes, so I can actually get to chapter 16 if I wanted to. Maybe chapter 15. I'm streaming. Okay. Okay, so we are now on, where are we? Okay, we're chapter 9. All right. Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Chapter 9, Hidden Seasons and Divine Endorsement. Okay, so every future leader must learn to value obscurity. God hides you to refine you. It's not punishment, it's protection. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness of Midian, away from titles and platforms and influence, before God ever sent him to Pharaoh's palace. In that desert, he learned how to lead people by first leading sheep. That long, quiet season was not wasted, right? It was shaping the patience, humility, and endurance he would then later need to shepherd an entire nation. The same pattern repeats with Jesus. Before he performed a miracle or preached to the masses, he spent 30 years in a carpenter's home, working with his hands, obeying his parents, and walking in silence. The Son of God did not rush to be seen, he waited to be sent. Those years in the workshop were not irrelevant. They were the foundation of credibility. Hidden seasons teach a leader to value process over popularity and faithfulness over fame. The future president must understand that obscurity is not the absence of purpose, it is the classroom of preparation. These quiet seasons are where God filters your these quiet seasons are where God filters your motives. When no one is watching, your heart's true agenda becomes visible. Are you serving for applause or for assignment? Many people crave visibility because they think influence validates their identity, but in the kingdom, it's the opposite. Identity must be proven before influence can be trusted. That's why God withholds certain stages, not because you're unworthy, but because you're unfinished. The small places expose whether you want power for prestige or power for purpose. If you're willing to do the right thing when there is no reward, you have passed one of heaven's hardest tests. God can trust a person who serves faithfully in anonymity because they won't self-destruct when the spotlight comes. Leadership without refinement becomes tyranny. Leadership forged in hidden obedience becomes legacy. I mean, I feel like we're seeing a lot of that happening today in practically about 90% of the world, but we're not going to get into that. Hidden seasons are also where you learn endurance, the ability to keep moving without applause. Every day you show up when no one notices, every day you show up when no one notices, you're building invisible muscle. You learn consistency when the results are slow. You learn gratitude when the platform is small, and you learn resilience when the doors don't open. These traits cannot be developed in fame. They're cultivated in faithfulness. David's years tending sheep didn't look like leadership training, but that's exactly what they were. Protecting lambs from lions and bears taught him strategy. It taught him courage and to care for the vulnerable, the same skills that would one day protect Israel. The wilderness didn't delay David, it defined him. It's in the small, seemingly irrelevant, and uneventful moments that great leaders develop reflexes of responsibility. The slow ride of daily stewardship teaches precision, how to act with integrity even when no one is clapping. The goal of these hidden years is not visibility, it's credibility. Fame may open doors, but character keeps them open. Many leaders fail not because they weren't called, but because they were exposed too early. When you build credibility in private, public authority becomes sustainable. That's what divine endorsement looks like. God publicly affirms what he's already proven to you privately. When Jesus was baptized, the heavens opened and God declared, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." The statement wasn't a surprise, it was confirmation. It was heaven saying, "You have passed the test of obscurity." True endorsement doesn't come from trending hashtags or headlines. It comes from a reputation earned in the unseen. The one who leads with a pure heart in private never needs to beg for promotion. God's timing will locate them. Hidden seasons are uncomfortable, but they are essential. They teach humility, the kind that keeps you grounded when praise starts echoing. They build endurance, the kind that keeps you standing when the critics come. They shape precision, the kind that helps you make wise decisions under pressure. So every small act of obedience, every quiet day of persistence, and every moment of restraint is building invisible authority. God doesn't skip the preparation part. If you can't handle the small room with excellence, the big stage will expose you. The palace does not make a leader, it reveals one. So if you're in a quiet season right now, leading a small team, serving a small community, managing a small responsibility, understand that you're in training. The size of your stage does not determine the weight of your calling. Stay faithful where you are. When your heart proves trustworthy in hidden seasons, God will give public endorsement. And when that day comes, you won't have to announce yourself because heaven will do it for you. And that is literally, I feel like that is actually, yeah, you don't want to get into a place where you're like, you're still trying to claim your space or whatever it is, but like, when you get announced that this is your position, this is your station, whatever, you want to have like proper backing. You don't want like loose nyanas, because there are situations where it's like whispered in like corners that, oh, okay, this person is leading now, whatever, and there's speculation here and there and all of those things. You don't want that to follow your like time to lead, or like your period of leadership, whatever it is that you want to call it. You don't actually, yeah, you want to feel confident in your position. Like you yeah, you want to feel confident. And I think that like with God positioning you for something, you feel a lot more confident. You feel like you're on actual, like, on a proper foundation. Because I don't know, I don't know what it is, but like, you feel validated. I think that's the word that I'm trying to get to. You feel validated, and you feel like, yes, I have arrived. And I think that once you have that consolidation within yourself, first of all, it's so much easier to show up in the world. And yeah, it's so much easier to show up in the world when you feel confident, when you feel like you have the right backing, when you feel like, I'm ready for this finally. Then you're like, yeah, let's do this. Okay, chapter 10. Let's do this. We don't have a lot of time. How much time do we actually have? Okay, so we have about 15 minutes. 15 minutes. We're in chapter 10. I want to get us to at least chapter 12, right? If we can get to chapter 12, I think that we would be doing just fine. Yeah, let's get to chapter 12 for today, and then we will maybe finish off the rest tomorrow or later on during the week or next week, whatever. But let's speed run chapter 10, 11, and 12 in the next 15 minutes, give or take. Yeah, we can do it. We can do it. We got this. Gobble cupcake. Okay, chapter 10, the mirror of accountability. Now we get to what the Madlanga Commission reveals. Okay, so the Madlanga, is that how you say it? I don't know. The Madlanga, Madlanga, Madlanga Commission. I don't know how to say it, but I'm going to say it whatever way that I'm saying it. Okay, so the Madlanga Commission, like every public inquiry before it, forces a nation to look at itself without filters. It shows us that corruption is not a headline, it is a process. It begins quietly with a decision made in secret, justified by convenience, tolerated by peers, and normalized by culture. What the Commission uncovers is not only financial theft, but moral erosion. Each testimony is a fragment of truth about what happens when personal gain becomes more sacred than public duty. These hearings are not just about those on the stand, right? They are about the system that allowed them to stand there in the first place. The lesson is quite sobering because corruption is not born in power, it is permitted by silence. For any future leader, the mirror held up by the Matlanga Commission reflects this truth that integrity cannot be situational. You don't become honest when you reach high office, you practice honesty in obscurity. When accountability disappears, the bloodstream of the nation becomes infected and institutions rot from within. Transparency, therefore, is not a burden of leadership, but it is its armor. The Matlala Commission revealed how political interference mutates governance into self preservation. Decisions meant to serve citizens become instruments to protect the powerful. Contracts, tenders, and appointments are no longer about competence, but compliance. When leaders manipulate institutions for personal or factional benefit, they break the spine of the state. The commission showed that corruption is not sustained by thieves. It is sustained by those in office who weaponize influence. Political interference is the quiet assassin of democracy because it replaces accountability with allegiance. For future leaders, this is a cautionary map. Do not touch what you are meant to oversee. The moment you use your position to tilt justice, you stop governing and you start looting by proxy. The Matlanga Commission laid bare how governance collapses when loyalty is rewarded more than performance. Every interference becomes a ripple that ends in unemployment, poverty, and distrust among citizens. Leadership was never meant to be ownership, it was meant to be stewardship. To lead without interfering is to respect both the law and the people that it protects. If the Matlanga Commission exposed corruption, it also exposed our national reflex denial. Every accused official insists on misunderstanding. Every misused fund is a procedural error. And every scandal is blamed on a few bad apples. Denial is the oxygen corruption breathes. It allows the guilty to delay justice until the public forgets. The problem is not just greed, it is the absence of confession. Nations don't heal by investigating, they heal by repenting. The Commission's transcripts show us a pattern of evasive answers and selective memories all of a sudden, which is a choreography of self protection. The future leader must learn that admitting failure is not a weakness, it is wisdom. A culture of honesty starts when leaders are more afraid of hypocrisy than humiliation. When a government refuses to acknowledge wrongdoing, it teaches its citizens to do the same in their own lives, to cheat on taxes, to lie on forms, and to bend small rules. The disease of corruption spreads from the top down, but its cure begins from the inside out. The great causality of corruption is not money, it's trust. When citizens no longer believe in their leaders, the social contract breaks. The Matlanga Commission showed that every stolen rand costs more than its value. It erodes confidence in the system that was supposed to protect everyone. Public trust is the invisible currency of governance, and once it is spent, recovery is slow. To rebuild it, leaders must operate as if every decision were televised, right? Isn't that easier? A moral economy thrives when transparency becomes a reflex, not just a regulation. Future leaders must understand that justice cannot be performed, it must be lived. Restoring dignity to governance means leading, that you are leading with accountability, that leading that leading with accountability is so consistent that even opponents respect your honesty. The lesson for the commission is simple, but it's costly. Corruption is not fought by police alone, it's fought by example. A clean budget means nothing if the hand signing it is dirty. Every commission ends with recommendations, but what matters is what comes after, right? The Matlanga Commission is not just a report, it's a warning label on the future. It says, do not repeat what you refuse to reform. A leader who studies these inquiries should not see politics as a game of survival, but as a calling to rebuild moral infrastructure. Integrity is not proven by speeches, but by systems that make wrongdoing impossible. The next generation of leadership must treat these commissions as textbooks, manuals on how not to govern. They must internalize one truth. The fight against corruption is not about catching criminals, it's about preventing the conditions that create them. Nations rise not when leaders are perfect, but when they are principled enough to stay accountable even when no one is watching. Right? That's what we've been talking about for the last 2 hours. The Matlanga Commission's legacy depends on whether its lessons become law in the hearts of those who lead next. Hopefully, the future leader's task is not to escape inquiry, but to live in such a way that inquiry is never needed again. Because why? Why are we spending so much time of the state's resources? Just, I feel like it's the same people that we're spending all of this money on. It's the same people who loot, the same people who go on vacation, same people who are just traveling around the world like and living their lives like it's golden. Like it's the same people that then come back here. We have these commissions and inquiries and investigations. Like what about the people who actually need like the state's resources? Why are we not thinking about that? Why? Tell me. Tell me why. We're gonna speed run to chapter 11. Hangdori. I think we can do it. We can do this. Chapter. Okay, we're gonna do chapter 11. And then, okay, cool. We've got about 8-ish minutes. So we can do 2 chapters. Okay, so chapter 11 is lessons on systems and character. Okay, every commission of inquiry is more than investigation. It's an autopsy of a nation's conscience. The Mandela Commission, like so many before it, was not just a procedural exercise in accountability, it was a diagnostic test on the state of our collective morality. What it reveals is not only corruption in contracts and appointments, but corruption in conviction. The hearings make something very clear to us. The failure of governance is not primarily technical, it's spiritual. Corruption is not merely the manipulation of systems, it's the decay of character. You cannot legislate morality into a man who has already sold his soul for status. You cannot build ethical institutions with people who have made peace with dishonesty. What collapses a nation is not weak policy, but weak virtue. And the Matlanga Commission, in all its painful revelations, is a mirror reflecting that truth. I mean, yeah. The hearings show that every scandal begins long before the paperwork. Corruption starts in the small decisions, in how a leader treats truth when it's inconvenient, how a civil servant handles power when no one is watching, and how a minister interprets loyalty when it conflicts with justice. These are moral equations, not administrative ones, right? The system is only as clean as the people who operate it. You can have the best anti corruption laws, the strongest oversight bodies, and the most sophisticated auditing tools, but if the men and women at the top believe that they are untouchable, the rot will find its way back in. This is what the Madlang Commission is laying bare. Corruption is not systemic in origin. It is systemic in symptom. The disease lives in the hearts of those who choose self-interest over service. For a future leader, this is the dividing line between ruling and leading. A ruler governs from the top down, believing that systems exist to serve him. A leader governs from the inside out, believing that systems must be protected from himself. The Matla Inquiry exposed what happens when the internal hierarchy is reversed, when those entrusted with stewardship become predators of the very institutions they were meant to safeguard. This is where the concept of character moves from personal virtue to national infrastructure. The moral strength of leaders becomes the unseen foundation of the state. When leaders crumble morally, the collapse is architectural. It spreads through departments, through boards and municipalities until dysfunction becomes normalized. A corrupt system is not simply one that steals, it is one that lies to itself so often that truth eventually becomes irrelevant. We've seen this. We're witnessing. So that is why reform must begin with people and not with paperwork. Policy can correct process, but only repentance can correct purpose. The Madlanga Commission teaches that rebuilding integrity requires both structural and spiritual repair. Structural repair means tightening oversight, digitizing transactions, enforcing term limits, and making all decision chains transparent. But spiritual repair means cultivating a national ethic that makes it harder to sin than to serve. It means appointing those who fear God more than they fear audits. It means surrounding yourself with truth tellers, not flatterers. Every president, every minister, every public official must build what I would call a circle of conscience, with advisors, auditors, and citizens who are empowered to challenge, question, and expose. Accountability should never depend on political mood. It must be designed into the architecture of leadership itself. The moment power becomes insulated from truth, corruption then finds some oxygen. It's got to find it some oxygen. We don't want to give it that oxygen. Yet the most piercing lesson from the Madlanga Commission is this: systems fail when leaders believe that their morality is private. Public service is not private property. The heart of a leader determines the health of the nation when ego goes unchecked. How a single dishonest leader can infect an entire bureaucracy with a culture of self-preservation. Once that rot starts to set in, no amount of institutional polish can save it. You can repaint the walls, rewrite the laws, restructure the departments, but if character is compromised, the house still collapses from within. This is why a future president must not only audit finances, but also audit hearts. You measure integrity not by under oath, but by what they practice in silence. Every decision should be tested by a simple standard. Does this serve truth or me? The Madlanga Commission is, in essence, a national classroom. It teaches through failure, through shame, through evidence that could have been avoided. It shows us what unchecked ego produces: chaos disguised as competence, power without purpose, politics without principle. It warns that no constitution, however well written, can withstand the corrosion of character. It calls for a new kind of leadership, not the charismatic populist kind that excites crowds, but the kind that resists temptation when no one is watching. This is the unseen governance that sustains nations, the quiet discipline of moral restraint. To lead a nation out of corruption is not to hold more inquiries, it is to create fewer reasons for them to exist. That begins with leaders who live transparently, not perform transparency. It begins with systems so honest that even when integrity remains embedded into the process. The future president, who truly learns from the Madlanga Commission, will not just speak against corruption. He will design his entire administration to make it structurally inconvenient to be corrupt. He will remember that corruption cannot survive in the light, and so he will keep the lights on even when it exposes himself. The lesson is not simply about governance, it is about human nature. We are all tempted, but only those who build guardrails of accountability around themselves are fit to govern others. In the end, the Madlanga Commission is not just history, it's instruction, right? It tells us the battle for integrity is never won once, it is fought daily, decision by decision, policy by policy, soul by soul. And if a nation wants to heal, it must start by choosing leaders who understand this. Systems can only carry the weight of character. Without moral backbone, every reform is temporary. The future leader who grasps that truth will not only lead better, but he will lead differently. He will see that leadership is not about power, but about purity. not about survival, but about stewardship. And when that kind of leadership returns, the need for commissions will finally end. Not because corruption disappeared, but because character has prevailed. We're on a roll. We're on a roll. Okay, so we're gonna do chapitre. Chapter 11. No, that was chapter 11. So we're gonna do chapter 12. Chapter 12. And then yeah, we're gonna call it a night. At least I'm gonna call it a night. I don't know where you are or what you be doing, but yeah, you can call it a day, you can call it a morning, you can call it whatever you want, but I'm gonna call it a night. All right. Okay, cool. Whew. All right. I'm running out of breath. I'm on speed running. Mm. Okay. All right. Let's hustle. Let's hustle. Let's hustle. Chapter. What? Okay, so this is chapter 12, right? Okay. I know we're over time, but I'm gonna finish chapter 12 before our live because why? Oh wait, no. So chapter 12, turning exposure into reform. I see this on TikTok so much, especially like in the comments. There's like a yeah. Oh, anyway, chapter 12, turning exposure into reform. This is where I'm happy to stop for today, and then we'll continue this when we continue this. A wise leader does not flinch at exposure. They understand that national embarrassment, when properly handled, can become national education. The Mandela Commission, with all its uncomfortable revelations, is not going to be something that should be remembered as a scandal archive, but as a manual for reform. Every testimony, every leaked document, and cross examination is a data point in understanding how power decays when accountability disappears. Future presidents must learn to treat these moments not as gossip, but as instruction, not as a threat to reputation, but as an opportunity to rebuild foundations. Right? The very first step to recovery is honesty. A nation that hides its failures will repeat them. Exposure is painful, but in governance, it is also purifying. They often repeat the same patterns, right? Weak procurement systems, political interference, and oversight bodies stripped of independence by those they were meant to regulate. The solution is not to form more committees, it's to act with courage where others have only spoken. Laws are only as strong as the wall that enforces them. A future president must therefore translate inquiry findings into legislative and administrative action, tightening procurement, enforcing term limits for oversight heads, digitizing state spending, and creating real whistleblower protection. These reforms are not glamorous things. They do not trend on social media or win elections quickly, but they are the slow, necessary work of cleaning the bloodstream of the state. Leadership is not about escaping scrutiny, it's about institutionalizing it. Yet, technical fixes alone will not save a nation that has lost its moral center. The Mandela Commission revealed more than loopholes in governance. It exposed a drought law, right? The cleanest code of ethics. But if the men who sign it do not fear God or respect the people that they serve, it becomes another unread document in a forgotten drawer. That's why reform must go beyond compliance and enter the realm of repentance. Repentance in governance is not a religious performance, it's a public accountability that says, we were wrong and we will change. A future leader must not only punish corruption, they must model confession. Integrity is contagious when it's visible, right? Imagine a president who admits past failures, who corrects course openly, and sets a new moral temperature for the entire civil service. That is how you turn exposure into transformation. The challenge is that most leaders fear humiliation more than they fear moral failure. That fear breeds cover ups, it breeds delays and spin campaigns. But the paradox of leadership is that vulnerability builds trust faster than perfection does. The nation does not expect flawless leaders, it expects honest ones. The lesson of Madlanga is that power must always be paired with transparency. If you're not willing to be audited, then you're not fit to govern. Future leaders must design systems that make exposure routine, not an exception. Quarterly reports should be made public. Executive decisions must be logged transparently. Independent investigators should be free from political influence. Reform means removing the possibility of quiet corruption. When sunlight becomes policy, shadows lose their power. A leader who builds such a system not only protects the nation from future scandal, but also protects their own legacy from being buried under it. Finally, every generation must study these commissions like future doctors study past pandemics, not with shame, but with resolve. The Madlanga Commission offers a blueprint for prevention. It teaches that corruption thrives where loyalty to people outweighs loyalty to principle, where political appointments outrank competence, and where secrecy masquerades as strategy. If the next generation of leaders can internalize these lessons, they will lead differently and more efficiently. They will build systems that prioritize truth over tribe, merit over connection, and accountability over comfort. Reform is not about cleaning up after corruption. To survive, that is how exposure becomes evolution. And that is how a nation matures. In the end, every commission is a mirror, and every mirror gives us a choice. Either you adjust what you see, or you pretend that it's not there. The Matlanga Commission's legacy will depend on what leaders choose to do with this reflection. Those who are wise will see that exposure, even though it's painful, is mercy. It gives us a chance to start again, not with cleaner slogans, but with cleaner systems and cleaner hearts. A leader who understands that will no longer fear the light because they lead in such a way that there will never be anything to hide. So, that is 12 chapters. I really thought I was going to go for 16 chapters, but it's all good, no worries, right? So, I don't think we're going to be doing this tomorrow. Maybe Friday, maybe next week, but possibly tomorrow. I don't know. But yeah, joining me if you joined in. And it was great having you around. And I will see you again. I think I'm going to go back to like a study with me live stream tomorrow, maybe in the afternoon. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it though. But yeah, so maybe a longer study with me tomorrow. I don't know. I'm still playing around with times, but yeah, I don't know. So thank you for. It's been real. We got through 12 chapters, and we actually got some ground. Still a lot that I still want dive into investigation investigation wise, yeah, investigation wise and whatever. But otherwise, I think we broke some good ground. See, and okay, about maybe even 70. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, that is me, and that is my contribution to everything that is happening right now. So really just don't feel discouraged. Just like start training to become the next leader. Start training right now, because I mean we see a lot of what is going wrong. So the best way to start training yourself is to, you know, start looking into like what is the opposite of that, what's the right side to it, and start putting those things into place. You like your community initiatives, you're working with NGOs or, you know, schools, youth, whatever it is that you're working with. Start there, start doing the right thing, start building your reputation of doing the right thing, of, you know, being a leader of service. You need a servant, being a servant, yeah, instead of you know, just doing that work for applause or whatever, because I mean applause will fade. So what does that mean? Like, are you going to stop doing the right thing just because people are not clapping for you, people are not celebrating you? Like, what is the deal here? Like, what is your anchor? You have to find your anchor, you have to find your purpose, and, you know, stand on it regardless of like what happens, because we need more principled people. We need more people who are not going to need to, you know, hide in the shadows or work from the shadows, or, you know, feel the need to make, you know, deals with shadow governments or whatever it is, just so that they can, you know, compromise their nation. I mean, like, what are we doing here? Because in compromising your nation, I feel like you're compromising yourself as well, because you also get affected in all of these things, albeit not necessarily with the same intensity, but eventually these things come back to bite you. So really, do you really want to be looking at your shoulder the whole time? No, we don't need those kind of leaders. We need leaders who are more principled, leaders who are not going to feel the need to, you know, apologize for doing the right thing. We need like the right kind of leaders who are not going to need to hide money under couches. I'm going to stop right there, and I hope that you have a good night. Okay, bye bye.